imagine if everybody in the world knew that there wasn't something special about these other people that, is why they've achieved certain success. What if they were just brave enough to take more action? And what if the flaws and the insecurities about themselves that they think they need to change before they get ready, what if actually you could lead with that? Things that were meant to break somebody actually make them. And somebody who's saying, yes, I'm this or I'm that, but also I struggle here and I've got this flaw or I've got this imperfection and I'm still doing big, bright, beautiful things.
This is Inspired Founders, a podcast that helps you find your true north in business and beyond. I'm Priscilla Skippington, a soul-led entrepreneur passionate about sharing the wisdom of world-leading business minds who have walked the path before us. From their toughest challenges to their greatest triumphs, we explore the stories that have shaped their journey and defined their future. Together, we discover the resilience and redemption it truly takes to achieve success, make a lasting impact on the world, and live a life that is truly fulfilling. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Inspired Founders podcast with me, Priscilla Skippington, with the incredible, amazing, super talented Samantha J. Welcome, Sam. So happy to have you here.
So good to be here.
I have been really excited for this call. We've obviously had many chats prior to today, and I know you fairly well, but I would really love my audience to get to know you better because everyone has seen, well, I'm assuming everyone's seen because you've got a pretty large profile. You're an award-winning entrepreneur. You have done some incredible things in your life. Like I said, you've won multiple awards, and you are literally changing the world through everything you're doing with your brand and the mission that you're helping other people on in their life. So I want everyone to know who Sam is behind closed doors, because I've obviously had an insight into who Sam is, and I want everyone else to have more of an insight as well.
I love this question. It was funny. As we got onto this podcast, I actually just got a flashback of when I first met you, of this photo of you. We're in Sydney Harbour at a business networking. And then I don't know what we said, but we just knew that night. It's like, we're going to be in each other's lives.
Yep, we did.
Love that. I think that's a little bit of an insight into who I am behind closed doors, is that I'm not a person who has heaps of friends, and I'm not a person who, whilst I have aspirations to want to create 1 billion impacts, like with the entrepreneurs that I support, I'm definitely actually a very private person. If I didn't have to be on stage and doing what I'm doing, I would literally live in a freaking country cottage, just me and my puppy, be a mom, and just I guess what really has driven me from a young age, being quite shy and timid in the beginning, is I've always looked around and I was looking and I was like, well, who are the leaders out there? And what type of leaders are they? And what are those leaders driving? And I guess most of the time I was like, why isn't there leaders driving philanthropy? Why isn't there leaders? I don't know. There were just topics. There were I guess ways that I wanted to change the world that I just didn't see other people doing. So that was really what took me from that shy, timid country girl from Wagga Wagga in Australia to then being like, fuck it. Okay, I'll get on stage. I'll talk about this. I'll get into politics. It's just because even though I was really afraid of public speaking and all those things, I really wanted to be a part of this change. So when I'm not being that change maker, I'm really quite quiet, and I'm just this sensitive, really easygoing, give zero fucks. I do switch a bit. I'm just normal person, and I think that's one of the bigger messages that I'm really passionate about sharing, is that a lot of people, they look at these people like Tony Robbins, Oprah, and they imagine that these people have special qualities about them. They're just exactly like everybody else.
Yeah.
They only just took some actions that allowed them to create different outcomes, but there's nothing special about anybody doing big things in the world. Everybody has something special inside of them. And it's just whether we recognize that, because there is something unique inside of us each as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that's so important to remember as like we're both on this entrepreneurial journey, and people can see a lot of that surface level of us online, especially now with social media being pretty much the key driver of most of our businesses, that they get an idea of who we are and what we do. And often it's just a projection, it's often actually not what's going on behind closed doors. So I'm really grateful for you to share more of, because I know you as quite a sensitive, quiet, private person, but I'm sure a lot of people don't see that part of you because they see you being the change maker and literally changing the world. I know you've had a really profound impact on my life and my journey. I would love to actually, we weren't going to dive deep into your story, but I think everyone needs to know a little bit more about the Samantha journey, because you were that timid country girl, and you started off a little bit differently because you had a family business that you jumped into straight after school. So if you want to talk through a little bit of how that started.
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest things that I've struggled with all my life was feeling like I didn't fit in. I didn't know where I belonged, and I really struggled to build a core sense of self. I think many people who are entrepreneurs, a lot of the time we think differently, and we think differently to literally 99% of other people in the world. And at the start, growing up in Wagga Wagga, I literally thought something was wrong with me because ever since I was little, I was like, let's change the world, let's do this. And I just had nobody around me who was like resonating with that. So I was like, fuck, like, so what I did in the beginning was I adapted myself with different masks in order to fit into my school. And what happened is in time, the longer that you do that, the more that it declines your mental health.
Mm.
So by the time I was, yeah,
Yeah.
by the time I was 19 years old, I was trying to figure out, well, what do I do with my life? My dad, he threw me a phone book and he said, well, we've got this property development, so give it a crack. And I was like, perfect, like freedom. At this stage, I'd been working in a bakery and I'd had my own other businesses for 5 years. So I love this idea of like having no boss, no rules, just figure it out. So within a few short years, I actually turned that into a multi-eight-figure award-winning entrepreneur career and empire. And we built that into the highest growing area in that particular district.
Mm.
And I won the top 6 in the regional pitch fest for this property development model that I'd created, which was bridging social psychology with property development. And I think a lot of people,
That's
but
crazy. That's such a different angle. Like no one would put those two things together.
yeah, but like for anyone who's listening who's like, I don't know where I fit in, there was no textbook that helped me to be able to create that.
Mm.
I have no business education. And what helped me was where I didn't fit in, what I thought was crazy about me. I was lucky enough to have one person only, my dad, validate that you're good. I believe in you. And I believe that's all we need is one person.
Mm.
And by him validating me, it was just enough of an external voice to start to build this internal voice of conviction.
Mm.
And I just allowed for my heart and what I thought was right for the industry to guide me. And then that's where that innovation came from.
That's amazing. And like you said, it's always that it just has to be one person.
Yeah.
And it's so good that you had your dad, who could be that for you in those early days. I know through that journey, you obviously won multiple awards. You had like crazy success. But I also know that through that, you did lose yourself a little bit, and not a little bit, probably a lot. And it caused you to have a bit of a breakdown and, reevaluate your life and where you were at. Do you want to talk us through a little bit how that all came about and where you went to from there?
Yeah, it's interesting about this concept of, I guess, losing ourselves, because in order to lose ourselves, we must first know ourselves.
Mm.
And when I look at that period of my life, it was, I guess, less about losing myself and more about not knowing myself enough. What I mean by that is like I was living life in accordance to what I thought would make me happy. Like I was working 12 to 16-hour days. I was building this empire. I wanted 2 investment properties by the time I was 22, I did everything that I thought was like living true to me.
Yeah.
But when I got to 22 years old and I had all of that, I had the Mercedes, two investment properties, all the things that I thought, I was like, but I'm not happy,
Yeah.
And what I learned in that point was like, oh, like there was a level of knowing myself that I didn't know,
Mm.
obviously then. And I realized that this isn't actually what's going to make me happy. And I remember when I trained with one of my mentors, Marshall Thurber. He's the godfather of personal development behind Robert Kiyosaki and Tony Robbins. I remember he gave me this quote once, and he said, purpose is not a destination. It's about going along the path. And when you go along that path, you say, well, this isn't it, is it? You kind of arrive to somewhere. And
Yeah.
then when you arrive to somewhere, it's like, well, this isn't it, is it? And it was one of those moments for me, like, this isn't it, is it? And it was like just moving the dial 5%, 10% to align it more to who I really knew myself to be. And it was like, some of these parts were about really wanting to use what I'd overcome with mental health, sexual abuse to start to help others, to bring more spirituality into what it was that I was doing, and also to be a mum. And
Mm.
that had never been in my vision. But at that point, I was like, I want to be a mum as well. And so now I really advocate, for entrepreneurs out there, rather than being reactive to business growth,
Mm.
be proactive and like really strategically plan in the beginning and be intentional, because most of us think as startups that we don't have choice. I don't have choice with hours, with money, with how many holidays. But at the end of the time, actually, we do have choice when we be intentional, and that's definitely what it taught me.
Yeah, amazing. That's really important about that we do have choice part as well, because in the startup phase, you do kind of just throw your entire life and lifestyle into your business, and you think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take hard work. And yes, it is. And it's going to take being tenacious. But you started the business because you were seeking some level of freedom and some level of fulfillment. And I know within my own journey, there's been definitely times where I've asked myself the same thing, this isn't it, is it? And we get, sometimes we can get so far down the path before we realize that actually all the things we're chasing and creating aren't actually fulfilling us. So I think that's really important to acknowledge that right back at the beginning of your journey, and know that you do have choice in what you're creating. I think that's really special.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a refinement process. And to
Mm.
give ourselves that, and I think, a lot of the time we might check in with ourselves like once a year, but I find that it's actually something better to check in, once a day, once a week, that, because it's like, just recently I was like, no, this isn't feeling right, and just instantly made a decision.
Mm.
And because I check in every day, it's like just one decision last week has created, I don't know, like 100x of opportunities right now. And so I think that one practical takeaway for the listeners is like, what's your spiritual practice for connecting with God, source, and spirit each day to
Mm.
actually connect into your head? Like, how's my head think about this? How's
Mm.
my heart think about, like, feel about this? And then what's my womb and heart know I need to do about this? And I think that that embodied level of self-integrity and congruency is, that's the ultimate pathway to that genuine fulfillment, is keeping that self-connection alive each day.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching on that, I mean, that really walks into my next question around finding your true north. It's been a journey, I know, for you, and it is on for every entrepreneur. But how did you know when you really discovered that true north of who Sam was? And what were those key pivotal moments in your life or in your career where you went, oh, wow, that really cracked me open. That really took me to another level of who Sam is?
Yeah, I love this question. I think there's a big difference between self-worth and self-confidence. And I was really confused between both of these for a long time. Like, self-worth is our internal inherent value and worth that is whole and complete, and nothing that we do in the world ever makes us a more worthy person.
Mm.
Whereas self-confidence is something that is about, well, I have a self-recognition of my internal worth, So when I put that worth into action, I create self-confidence because I build things in my external world that are of value to myself and others. And so for me, the true north, it's a beginning of it's a process that begins with, I think, our connection to our spirituality
Mm.
and learning to turn down the voices of the external world to zero and turn up that internal voice of our self-worth and our connection to God to 100.
Yeah.
And I think in the process of that, whether it's a silent meditation retreat or it's being off technology for a period or sitting in meditation, I think that when you know yourself through the eyes of God, regardless of external validation or society standards or media or your parents' stories of this is what it means to be a successful man or woman, it's in that you decide this is what makes me happy.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be in the measure of society, but it's more like this is now I know who I am. I know my values. I know what makes me happy. And I think then the more that you practice self-confidence, which is to take that internal awareness of knowing who you are and then taking actions congruently to that, then
Mm.
when you take those actions, you're going to have a feeling.
Yeah.
And if it's energizing you, you know you're in alignment. But if you're doing something and you're tired, you're exhausted, you've got to push, it's like you could be in the right job and then at one point you're struggling to get out of bed. It
Yeah.
was like you knew yourself, you were living on purpose, but obviously now that's not what you're meant to be doing because you're tired. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's why that daily self-connection is so important because if you start to ignore those signs, first it's a feather, then it's a brick, then a bus. The
Mm.
feather's like, I'm tired. The brick is I'm not getting as many bookings in my business.
Mm.
The bus is I've got to go for surgery kind of thing, or my
Mm.
marriage collapses and I'm getting divorced. It's like, so these signs are always there, but we have to practice that self-connection each day to look for where's the feather, where's the brick, where's the bus, and then we can keep aligning to wherever that true north is guiding us next.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogy of the feather and the bus. And I've had various moments in my life where it's definitely been the bus. The
But
universe was like, here you go, we're going to realign you, which at the time you sometimes don't see and appreciate. But when you look back, you can really go, oh, well, that was definitely realigning me. That was definitely pivoting me because if I'd kept going on that journey, it wouldn't have been good or it wouldn't have been where I wanted to be. So, yeah, I love that analogy. And I've heard that multiple times and I do use that myself. So, on that, did you have any key experiences that really broke you open? I know that you went traveling for 6 years. Did you have anything in those 6 years that really, really pivoted that?
well, it's funny because you're going to Peru in like a few months and you're actually going to experience one
Yeah,
of
I
them.
know.
I definitely think the Washuma ceremony that I did in Peru, that's why I'm wanting like, everybody to experience that that's on that retreat, which is Washuma is a grandfather spirit. And now this is pretty woo-woo. I don't know, we've got
Oh,
woo-woo
we're
people.
going there. I'm totally fine with that. And I'm sure our listeners will be too.
So it's a grandfather spirit of a cactus plant, and you kind of mush all that cactus up and then you drink it.
So, type of plant medicine.
Yeah, it's a type of
Yep.
plant medicine.
Hmm.
And it's the medicine of light or the medicine of love in the heart. And I remember when I took that, I was pretty hard at the time. Like I was a hardened woman. I had a lot of protection and I was using my business to avoid intimacy. That's why when I was 22, I was like, well, this business success, it's not fulfilling me because it was a great way to always be busy, but I was really afraid of being seen. I was afraid of love. I was afraid of intimate relationships, really. So when I did this plant medicine ceremony, whoa, it opened my heart so much that I began I felt through this experience all the layers and all the protection, all the masks, all the armor around my heart all go. And I
Mm.
felt so much safety in my heart, so much openness, so much trust, so much connection to my feminine energy that I was like, oh, this is who I am. Like, this is my authentic self. And it was amazing to feel that because all that darkness and emptiness it all got filled in that moment with self-connection,
Yeah.
with knowing who I am when I don't close my heart to myself, to others, to the world, and then wonder why I feel disconnected, empty, and unfulfilled.
Mm.
And one of the things I now know that I've never spoken about is that if I only had that inner connection, I really do believe I wouldn't have had to leave the property development. It wasn't necessarily the property development that was creating the emptiness and the unfulfilled and all of those things. It was who I was being and the
Mm.
lack of self-connection inside of me. A lot of people, they'll leave a marriage or they'll leave the business or they'll think this is the next shiny object and all these things, but that's actually not the problem. What the problem is that self-connection and opening our heart to love first for ourselves and then others. And so that was a life-changing experience for me. And that's why I've given all my clients San Pedro. Because it's scary. Like, I'm not saying I'm done the work. My heart is still, I get afraid. When my heart's opening, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to be seen. Don't see me.
Yeah.
But they're all just stories about, I'm afraid, you'll see my imperfections, what I judge about myself, and so it's easier to walk around the world with different masks and characters we play and with a more closed off heart or being more distant to people. So I think it's like a journey, but
Mm.
one of the things about entrepreneurship is that you realize it's not about the destination. That's cool and that's fun, but that lasts for a second.
Mhm.
Forget about trying to aspire to create anything. Like, that's great. I set ambitious goals, but I don't set the ambitious goal because I want to achieve the goal. I
Mm.
set the ambitious goal because of who I become through the process. And like, you've got your Inspired Founders event. Like, it's the journey to create that event. It's the people and the memories you have. It's like, I don't want to just run a meeting. Like, how much fun can we have in this meeting? How can we create amazing memories along the way? Because it's really actually more about the people we share the journey with. And that's why this heart piece was so crucial for me, because I was pretty isolated
Mm.
and I was alone. And now this has really taught me, you can go so far. What's that quote, that African proverb? Something about going fast, go alone,
We'll
go
go with
slower.
that because I don't know.
Go fast, go alone, go a bit slower. You bring the people and it's happier. I don't know what the quote is. It's a great quote.
Yeah, great. We'll paste it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Amazing. And what an experience. Like I am really excited to go to Peru and experience that myself. I know I have the cactus drops and I do take those. I actually had some this morning.
So good.
Yes, and I mean, since we've known each other, I know I've been working a lot on opening my own heart and softening because I was very much the same. You really, through different trauma and life experiences, and especially being on the entrepreneurial journey where most of the time you are on your own and it's really hard to connect with your friends, your family who aren't on the same journey. And so you do become very isolated. I think for me, it was very unintentional, but it definitely happened over the journey. And so I became quite hard, I would say. The last 5 or 6 years, I've become really quite hard and isolated. And so over the last 18 months of having you more in my life, I have really softened. And it's been such a beautiful experience because I've seen how it's played out in my relationship and with my family and with my husband. Like when we change within ourselves, when we consciously change and open up and soften within ourselves, it radiates and I feel so blessed to have it's still a journey, but come to the other side of that and go, this has really impacted my family in such a beautiful way, and I'm so grateful. And I see you've got tears in your eyes right now.
Yeah, I love, like, because I've all the stories you've shared, not only with your husband but also with your children, and
Mm,
the gift that we as women get to give children. I think I'm not a mum yet, but to have this soft space for them to land, because we are the role models as women of how men relate to their femininity. And it's just been so beautiful, because I think you've got one boy that's like you and one boy that's, I think, not. So I just
I've
like,
got polar opposite children that look, personality, everything.
so I love that. Like, that's been a gift for me to hear that about that and how both of your relationship has changed too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it definitely has, and you're a big part of that. So thank you so much. Let's slide into business a little bit more. You have been interviewed by so many people. You have interviewed a lot of people. I mean, you've got a top-rated podcast yourself. What's been one conversation that you've really enjoyed, loved, got so much out of over the years? Who's been that one person you're like, oh wow, you're inspiring me?
Mm. Oh, that's such a great question. I think it would have been at the Women Changing the World Impact Awards. I listened to this woman and I recommend everybody follow her, Dr. Trent.
Mm,
She's Oprah's all-time favorite guest. And whoa, she was doing a speech. I just pulled out my phone, hit record, because this woman, she walked onto the stage and her presence, before she even said a word, just like the
yeah.
room went quiet. And when she spoke, it was like she was just this, like, yeah, this, I don't even know how to put, like, her whole heart was open. That's what I want to
Mm,
say. Like what we were talking about before, when she spoke, every word emanated like just this open heartedness, but with this full power. And she, in her speech, spoke about this one thing that's just, I'll never forget. And I'm sharing this everywhere. She said, as women, we're different to men. We're more sensitive. We have more feelings, all of those things. That's why we must embrace our softness. And she said, as women right now, we must ask ourselves this question: what breaks your heart? Because she said, what breaks your heart in the world, what moves you to tears, what you're angry about, what you feel like, that is your purpose. And she's like, what breaks your heart? It's time to like stand up and speak up for it. And I was like, oh my God, and I love this because if we're hardened and we
yeah.
can't even feel, we don't even have emotions as women, we're not allowing ourselves to cry and be these sensitive, freaking emotional creatures. It's like, when a woman is standing and she's like talking and you feel her passion, you feel that. And, that is her connection to her emotion.
Mm,
So I really think that one of our biggest superpowers as women is our emotion, and how
mm.
we use that emotion to carry that emotion through our words. And people are like, they're moved in the room. If you think about a woman who's angry, anger is the same energy as passion.
Yeah, right.
And when a woman's connected to anger, like she can really channel that in ways, I believe, that make her really passionate about topics. Then she can write about it, speak about it, run events with it. And so I think that was one of the most life-changing conversations for me.
Yeah, amazing. Did you have a chat with her after the speech at all? Did you get an opportunity to have a one-on-one or no?
I haven't yet. Yeah, I haven't yet. We're all connected in there, so I've got her number.
Wow.
Yeah, the number. I got the Duchess of York's number. Definitely next year, I'm organizing some really cool events and stuff in Australia. So my plan is to go wherever this woman is, learn from her.
Yeah.
But she's my inspiration for speaking now.
Amazing. And do you know what I love in hearing how you spoke about her? That's how I see you. So isn't it amazing in life how like when we first met, it was like I saw a part of myself in you that I aspired to be, you know? We gravitate towards people who we see parts of ourselves in, even if we don't always recognize it at that time. And it's just, yeah, I believe you're already on that journey. You've already got that essence and that power. And anyone who's coming to the Inspired Founders launch event will see that and will feel that because when you talk, you have that as well. So, yeah, just reflecting that back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so my big thing, Inspired Founders is all about inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs who really are here for that heart led, soul led mission where they want to impact more than their own life and their own family. It's, that greater mission and impact the globe. I mean, that's my mission. I want to impact at least 1 million lives. And this podcast is one way to do it. If there was one thing you could share, leave the world with, what would that be?
I'm just gonna have to take a moment for this one.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think it's that your imperfections don't make you broken. They make you the most beautifully equipped to be a man or a woman who can change the world. I think that a lot of the time people think that they need to hide their flaws and their insecurities, and that to be an inspiring person is to be somebody who's perfect and has achieved all these things. But I don't think that's really in my idea what makes somebody inspiring. I think what I'm inspired by is when things that were meant to break somebody actually make them. And somebody who's saying, you know, yes, I'm this or I'm that, but also I struggle here and I've got this flaw or I've got this imperfection and I'm still doing big, bright, beautiful things. So I think imagine if everybody in the world knew that wasn't something special about these other people that, you know, is why they've achieved certain success. What if they were just brave enough to take more action? And what if the flaws and the insecurities about themselves that they think they need to change before they get ready, what if actually you could lead with that? Speak about that on your stage, on podcasts, and be like, I struggle with this, and too, I'm still doing the thing, and you can too.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I resonate so much with that. And I know we've had multiple conversations about that very thing that, you know, for so long I hid behind multiple masks, as did you. You know, you create this facade for yourself and these masks for yourself because you think that's how you have to be and how you have to be perceived by the world if you want to be great and successful. But in fact, when you peel back the layers and you let people see your vulnerability and who you really are, that's where the magic is. That's where the beauty is. And I know that through these raw, real conversations that we're having at Inspired Founders, this is where people will really be inspired because they'll get to identify that who they are is just perfect and what they have is just perfect as well. And they get to inspire from that, not from something they go on and create and a brand that they create for themselves. It's who they are deep down. So yeah, I think that's amazing. And thank you so much for joining us today. I always love speaking with you. You have so much wisdom for such a young person who's still very much on your journey, but you've already impacted so many lives. I know mine has been one of those. I'm so grateful to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this inspirational story. Lucky for you, the inspo doesn't stop here. We have an Inspired Founders Facebook community, a space created just for you to learn, listen, and ask questions from our inspired founders themselves. This unique community is designed to uplift and motivate you to take actions on your own stories and dreams. You'll find the link within our show notes. We can't wait to see you in there.
This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.